Okay, everybody, welcome to our recorded lesson for this week. It's going to be on post-war subcultures. So, our objectives and standards to analyze the views of the Beat movement in post-war society and to explain different subcultures in post-war United States. And if you would please take a look at the standards as well. And our vocabulary preview for this lesson is just one word. We have the Beat movement. And I want you to think about this, and I want to make sure that you also answer to think about this question before you start the recording. So hopefully you got a chance to do that. If not, you can always go back and do that now or later. But why would people be against the popular culture of the 1950s? Okay, so remember that this is think about this question. I'm going to highlight for you. There we go. Okay, so make sure you answer that on the previous page of the questions, okay? And our central question, what were some views of subcultures of the post-war period? So what are some things that these subcultures are kind of representing, kind of going against, things like that? All right, so speaking out. So pop culture and the media had a large amount of viewers in the 1950s, as you've seen, as we discussed, television shows and movies, and a lot of people are definitely conforming to, the television agendas and the movies and things like that. So it's just everyone's kind of falling into line of watching the same shows. Everyone's kind of going to go see the same movies. Everybody, the men get up and go to work, and the women stay home and take care of the kitchen, and the house, like we talked about. Um, but as the 1950s go on, especially in the later 1950s, different people and groups are going to begin to speak out against, conformity and, fitting in with everybody and not, not really being an individual, just kind of fitting in with everything that's going on around them. And this idea is these subcultures are definitely going to give rise to a counterculture that is going to spread in the 1960s, and we'll see that more so as we get into the 1960s, but this is the rise of that type of movement. So most nonconformists in the post-war period could be found in New York City's Greenwich Village, San Francisco, or Los Angeles, so big urban centers basically. And this movement was known as the Beat movement. It had a lot to do with music, so that's where they kind of got their nickname from. But it also included artists, poets, and writers. And these artists, poets, and writers and musicians, they typically rejected work, like we said, going to work or um, the office kind of business way of life for people. They also looked to higher consciousness, so higher thinking through Zen Buddhism. And they also did experiment, like we said, with different music, and sometimes they did experiment with drugs, especially as we get in the 1960s. We'll see more of that, but a lot of the times they are experimenting with different types of drug as well. Not all of them, but some of them do. Poets and writers typically found freedom with writing and writing in a free and open form. And they typically read their writings out loud in gathering places such as coffee houses. And we still see this today a lot of times that people, have poetry events or whatever in coffee houses and, are kind of, expressing their opinions about different things. So this is where this movement kind of brought about some changes that we still see today. Some famous Beat movement authors include Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac. I'm sorry if I'm saying that name wrong. But these were some of the main authors of the period. All right, maybe you've heard of this next group from movies or TVs or books or whatever. But we have the Greasers. So another subculture that emerged in the 1950s was the Greasers. Now these were typically made up of youth from lower classes, and they were typically found in urban cities. Although there are sometimes they can be found in the suburbs as well. They were known as greasers due to their greased back hairstyle. And a lot of the big representatives or symbols of the movement include Marlon Brando, who's a famous actor, excuse me, and James Dean, which you may have heard his name as well. And we'll take a look at them later as well. Greasers could also be associated with crime. Not all of them, but a lot of times they were more, known for being, associated with crime, and they also rode motorcycles. And another thing I want to add too is that women could become greasers as well, become part of that greaser society. If you've ever seen the movie Grease, it's a musical. If you've ever seen that, you can think definitely of those actors. Those would definitely be considered greasers because they have the slick back hair, which we see here, and a lot of times they wore the leather jackets too. So this was definitely one way that you could represent greasers or notice that somebody was a greaser. Okay, and they're also just kind of while they listen to rock and roll music, they listen to pop music at the time. They were just kind of again into fighting and sticking up for their territory or their neighborhood or things like that. So again, that kind of went against the whole conformity way of life of the 1950s. Okay, so to kind of wrap up a little bit, remember that the Beat movement used writing to express nonconformity. Um, they were coming about to kind of bring about some different thoughts about not just always giving into the conformist way of life and trying to be more individuals and stuff like that. And we also have the greasers who represent nonconformity from urban centers and sometimes suburbs, like we said. You could typically recognize one through their greased back hair, their motorcycles, their leather jackets. And again, they were just kind of like I don't want to say a rough bunch of guys, but they were into, fighting a little bit and standing up for their neighborhood or their territory. So that's how they kind of fit into this whole subculture way of life as well. All right, guys. Well, that's all I have. So again, please make sure you do the think about this question in the beginning, and make sure you answer the questions. And I'll see you and talk to you later.